I divorce an infertile good-for-nothing and remarry a young and cute woman. Just after having my ovaries removed, Ken suddenly stood up from his chair, interrupting the doctor, and burst into laughter. Both the doctor and I were shocked, looking up at Ken. I've already got a cute woman. I'll have her give birth. Saying this, Ken pulled out a divorce paper from his bag. Apparently, he had been preparing for it since I was diagnosed. Hearing this, I felt ridiculous. Okay. Glad you're understanding, said Ken, sitting back down and urging the doctor to continue. The doctor glanced at me and then started. Actually. What? Ken's face went pale at the doctor's shocking revelation. I looked at Ken and inwardly exclaimed, "Serves you right. My name is Emily. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. I used to work as an office assistant but quit when I got married. As a housewife, I do chores and also sell my handicrafts online as a hobby." I met Ken at work. At our workplace with frequent drinking parties, I took care of Ken when he got drunk at a year-end party, which started it all. He invited me out for a meal to thank me. And after a few dates, he confessed. We started dating. Ken, being in sales, was quite a smooth talker. I was always smiling around him, and he cheered me up even on tough days. So, when he proposed, I happily accepted. Planning the wedding was hard, but it was joyful. Ken's family included his parents and his brother Simon. His dad was really nice, always giving me my favorite sweets and gift cards for meals with Ken. I only met his brother Simon once, but he was very kind. His brother's wife was also very polite, and I wanted to get along with her. In contrast, his mom openly disliked me, always glaring and making snide remarks. Naturally, I didn't like her and tried to avoid meeting her as much as possible. However, Ken didn't like my attitude and kept trying to make me meet his mom. When I expressed my reluctance, he would get angry, saying, "Are you ignoring my mom?" On our anniversaries, I tried to spend time just with him, avoiding his mom. Then one day, when Ken and I went out to eat, his mom was waiting at the restaurant. I turned pale and looked at Ken. "You invited your mom! I thought you'd be happy. You wanted it to be just us, didn't you?" It was my birthday, and I insisted on Ken. He looked annoyed, looking down at me. "How long are you gonna keep this up? Mom's trying to get along. Acting too proud for a daughter-in-law, aren't you?" His words felt like a blow to the head. I realized he had always thought that way. And began to tear up. "Don't cry. Ugh, what a hassle. That's cruel. I was looking forward to this." "So what, you want me to send Mom away now?" Ken started yelling in frustration. At this point, if I didn't back down, it wouldn't end. I couldn't stand the stares from passers-by. "Fine, it's my fault. That's right. Now that you get it, let's go. Mom's waiting." Ken looked satisfied with my apology and forcibly took me to his mom. The rest of the evening was a nightmare. I had to sit next to his mom, listening to her endless complaints about every dish. And every time I ate, she would smirk and comment, "Emily, your upbringing seems a bit poor. Don't you know any manners?" What did I do wrong? Each time I asked what I was doing wrong, my mother-in-law just smirked without explaining anything. Ken did the same, just smirking. "Ken, what am I doing wrong?" "Huh? You can't figure that out? That's why you're being criticized." Every time I was ridiculed, my heart shrank and I felt like crying. My long-awaited birthday was ruined. I forced myself to eat the tasteless meal. Even the cake brought by the restaurant staff seemed like it was for my mother-in-law's birthday, as she blew out the candles and took center stage. The situation didn't change until we went home, turning my birthday into the worst one ever. I couldn't calm down, and when I confronted Ken after getting home, he frowned. "Can't believe you're not having fun even though my mom came specially." "But it was mostly your mom. You're so ungrateful," Ken shouted again. It lasted until the date changed, and Ken didn't calm down until morning. "I'm going to sleep. Make sure the house is clean," Ken said before unilaterally ending the conversation and going to the bedroom alone. Left alone, I did the housework, completely drained. Since I became a full-time housewife, Ken had stopped doing any household chores. Whenever I asked for help, he would reluctantly agree, often retorting, "You call yourself a housewife." By the time we had been married for 3 years, I stopped asking, and it was settled that Ken would handle work and I would do all the house chores. You know, I kinda want a baby soon. Yes. Still can't make it happen? Huh? I was puzzled by Ken's tone. Our physical relationship was lackluster but regular. However, Ken's words sounded like he was blaming me for not being able to conceive. Do you think it's my fault we can't have babies? What else could it be? I was angered by Ken's blunt words. I had undergone a checkup before our marriage. And there were no issues. So, if we couldn't have kids now, it was likely that Ken was the cause. I voiced this thought. And the next moment, I was on the floor. You! Don't joke! The problem is obviously with you. Ken's deep voice echoed in the living room. I looked up at Ken, holding my stinging cheek. It's your fault for not getting pregnant, and you dare blame your husband? I'll get my mom to scold you too. Get ready. Then Ken called his mom in front of me. She was coming over immediately. Ken smirked down at me. What do you mean it's my son's fault? How dare you say that when you're being supported by him? As soon as my mother-in-law entered our house, she slapped my cheek. The side opposite to the one Ken hit was stinging, and tears welled up in my eyes. Really, a woman who can't admit her faults should be returned. A defective product that can't even have kids. I glared back at her, infuriated by her harsh words. Then my mother-in-law screamed at me in a shrill voice. How dare you? Fine. Let's get tested. Once we find the cause, I'll get alimony and have you divorced. Okay. I nodded at her words. Ken seemed dissatisfied but was persuaded by his mom to agree to the tests. We booked an appointment at the nearest hospital. On the day of the test, my mother-in-law barged into our house. She intended to accompany us for the infertility tests and hear the results together. Ken, looking slightly displeased, accepted her coming along. At the hospital, Ken and I were directed to different areas for testing. I had been declared normal in the checkup, so I was confident about this test too. The results had to be normal. That's what I thought until the doctor spoke. You have a tumor. We need to operate immediately. What? While receiving a plain explanation about the surgery, I felt everything go dark before my eyes. Next to me, my mother-in-law was listening intently, but her mouth corners were turned up, showing no sign of concern. Does this mean Emily can no longer get pregnant? No, we're just removing one ovary, so pregnancy is still possible in the future. However, the chances of natural conception will decrease by about 30%. My mother-in-law feigned a dramatic shock at this explanation. And then glanced at me, sighing. I was so looking forward to grandchildren, it's such a shame. But, the surgery comes first, of course. Yes, let's begin the surgery right away. I was led to surgery, still unable to grasp the situation. Ken, after hearing the explanation from his mother, simply said, "See, it's not my fault," and went out for drinks, not even waiting to hear his own results. The thought of him going out for drinks while his wife was undergoing surgery, without a word of concern. It confirmed my belief that Ken no longer loved me. Perhaps I wasn't as sad as I should have been, maybe because I had sensed it all along. I faced the surgery alone. It went smoothly and was successfully completed. The wound hurt, but there seemed to be no other problems. While I was alone in the hospital, Ken sent me a message. It only mentioned the housework piling up and to not forget about the insurance claim. Not a single word asking if I was okay. That message made me feel my fondness for Ken fading away. Then, during a post-surgery checkup, the doctor told me a surprising fact. The doctor had tried to inform Ken of his test results, but he didn't listen and ended the consultation. I asked the doctor not to tell him yet, and to inform him during the final checkup before my discharge, with Ken present. The doctor agreed to my request and kept the information from Ken. There was no contact from Ken. No word from my mother-in-law. Despite the uneasy atmosphere, I spent a quiet and peaceful time in the hospital. I sent a message to Ken, asking him to come only on the last day. And then, the day of discharge and the final checkup arrived. Ken, unusually, came early in the morning and, while being friendly with the nurses, helped me with the discharge preparations. Thank you. Well, it's the last time, after all. His words "the last time" caught my attention, but Ken didn't elaborate, so I didn't press the matter. Once everything was ready, Ken and I were led by a nurse to the doctor's office. Emily, there were no complications. Congratulations on your discharge. Thank you. I thanked the doctor. When the doctor was about to speak to Ken, Ken started saying, I divorce an infertile good-for-nothing and remarry a young and cute woman. Suddenly, Ken stood up from his chair, interrupting the doctor, and laughed loudly. Both the doctor and I were taken aback, looking up at Ken. I already have a cute woman. I'll have her give birth instead, Ken said as he pulled out a divorce form from his bag. Apparently, he had been preparing for it since my diagnosis. Hearing this, I felt ridiculous. All right. Good that you're reasonable, Ken said, sitting down and urging the doctor to continue. The doctor glanced at me before speaking. Actually. What? Ken's face turned pale at the doctor's shocking words. I looked at Ken, thinking, serves him right, inside my head. Ken, unable to grasp the situation, trembled with a pale face. I sat calmly beside him. What do you mean, I'm infertile? Ken, it's clear that you have absolutely no sperm. Not only is natural conception impossible, but there's also no hope with fertility treatments. That's a lie! Ken yelled, grabbing my shoulder, and started to shout at me. His face contorted with pain. You orchestrated this, didn't you? Is this revenge because I said divorce? I answered Ken with a tone of disbelief. Why would I need to do such a nasty thing? Besides, I didn't even know about the divorce until you mentioned it here. Oh, right. Ken slumped into his chair, mumbling something under his breath. Then, after a moment, he tentatively asked the doctor. Is it really 0%? Well, to be precise, it's nearly impossible. Natural conception won't happen unless a miracle occurs. At these words, Ken's face lit up. He then started grinning. Seems I've made that miracle happen. What do you mean? My girlfriend, she's pregnant. Ken's revelation even surprised me. The doctor looked equally astonished. It was understandable. A husband discussing his affair and the pregnancy of his mistress during a medical consultation was shocking. So, I'm sorry, but I need you to divorce me quickly. I gotta be with her. Ken seemed almost ready to dance with joy. I silently signed the divorce papers and handed them to Ken. I agree to the divorce, but I'll be discussing property division through a lawyer later. Yeah, I get it. She's cute, you know. Don't be jealous, I replied, exasperated by Ken's unnecessary concern. After that, we parted ways at the hospital. I went home, and Ken returned to his parents' place. Once home, I immediately started packing. I also took the opportunity to look through Ken's study. It seemed he hadn't bothered to hide anything, as evidence was abundant. It appeared he had met his mistress at a bar. A casual conversation with her, a part-time worker there, likely started it all. Opening his computer, I found his messaging app still open, with all the contents visible. There were numerous incriminating photos, which I forwarded to my phone. Normally, seeing such intimate photos of a beloved husband with another woman would bring tears, but my love for Ken had dried up. Instead of crying, I almost laughed. The next day, I printed the messages and photos and took them to a nearby law office. The female lawyer was very kind, listening to my story to the end. She even got angry with me and agreed to give Ken a hard lesson. We prepared a legal notice and sent it to Ken at his parents' house. The day the notice arrived, Ken bombarded me with calls. Reluctantly, I answered. Hey! What's this all about? What do you mean? It's a legal notice. Not that. Why the alimony? He seemed not to have listened at the hospital. I explained earlier. The alimony is for verbal abuse. I told you she's pregnant. I can't pay any alimony. Isn't your girlfriend gone by now? Ken gasped at my words. His predictable reaction made me laugh. That's too bad. You should have told her you were married. It's not an affair. Such a selfish argument won't hold up. Hearing my exasperated words, Ken started yelling in fury. Apparently, he hadn't told his girlfriend about being married. When the legal notice arrived, she called me. I was surprised to learn that she hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet, feeling something off about Ken's parents' behavior and his words. She said she planned to leave the house soon. I learned one more crucial detail, which I decided to keep until the end. For now, I only shared these 2 points with Ken. He was speechless. If you hadn't interfered, I would have been happy by now. No, it's your fault for not telling her. Ken seemed lost for words again. I half smiled as I spoke to him. Anyway, I look forward to the payment. You're gonna have a tough time. Hey, do you know where she went? Ken, seemingly in a panic, asked me that. Indeed, I had received a call from her, but she didn't mention her destination. When I told him this, Ken clicked his tongue. You're really useless. That's why you got cheated on and divorced. I'd rather not be lectured by someone who's being sued for alimony. What? No matter what he said, it had no effect on me. Instead, everything bounced back on Ken, digging his own grave. His pitiful attitude was so ridiculous that I couldn't stop laughing. Let's have a talk with our lawyers involved for now. I want your signature on the documents, too. All right. I get it. Finally getting his agreement, I ended the call and lay down on my bed. I knew things were about to get busy. I took a deep breath, thinking about what lay ahead. 3 days later, my lawyer and I were standing in front of Ken's parents' house. It looked more rundown than the last time I was here. Oh, you're late. Come in quickly. Ken's mother greeted us, glaring with undisguised annoyance. We're on time, actually. May we come in? Such cheek. I'm glad you're getting divorced. I could almost hear her teeth grinding as she let us in. In the living room, besides Ken, his brother Simon was also there. I wondered where their father was. Is your dad not here? At my question, both Ken and his mother made faces as if they had swallowed something bitter. Then Simon explained the situation. Actually, Dad got furious at Ken and divorced Mom, who was defending him. What? I exclaimed, looking at Ken's mother, who was avoiding my gaze. While giving her sidelong glances, Simon continued. He's staying at my place now. He's not in the best health, so he's resting at home today. He apologized for what happened to you, Emily. I always appreciated how kind your father was to me. Simon smiled and nodded at my words, then looked sternly at Ken. I didn't want to come, but conversations don't go anywhere with just these two. That's why I decided to join. Knowing why Simon was here, I understood. Given Ken's mother's reception, I doubted this discussion would be smooth. It's because of you that Dad left. We should be asking for alimony from you. Yeah, right. The pregnant wife he snagged is gone too. You're like a curse, aren't you? At their ridiculous claims, Simon, the lawyer, and I exchanged glances and burst out laughing. It was Ken's mother's unreasonableness and her defense of Ken's actions that drove the father away. And the new wife left because Ken had deceived her about being married. In other words, both left because of Ken and his mother. With all due respect, you and Ken are both too quick to blame. The fault lies entirely with you two in this situation. How dare you speak like that to me? You're just a daughter-in-law. Not anymore. Ugh. You're so petty. That's what I hate about you. Huh? I watched as Ken's mother ranted in fury and responded calmly. Ken just looked back and forth between us, helpless. Has he always been this pathetic? I felt nothing but disappointment. Ken, say something for yourself. Ken, stay out of this. I'll handle it. You don't have to pay her anything. Ken's mother defended him as he hid behind her. Pathetic for a 35-year-old. I glared at Ken, who had quieted down at his mother's words. So bold, and yet, in front of your mom, you can't say anything. I hated that mama's boy part of you. I'm not a mama's boy. Finally responding, Ken provoked me to drop a bombshell. Did you tell your mother that you're infertile? We don't need to talk about that. But that's where it all started. Shut up. Seeing Ken's panicked reaction, I realized he hadn't told his mother. I laid out the medical reports in front of her. Her face went pale as she looked at them. What is this? This is wrong. Sure, they said it's difficult for me, but she got pregnant, so it's not impossible. She looked relieved at Ken's words, and then turned a triumphant face towards me. What are you misunderstanding? Just because you're infertile, don't go making Ken out to be impotent too. Are you sure it was really Ken's child she was carrying? My question left Ken's mother momentarily dumbfounded before she glared at me ferociously. I showed them further evidence. Here's an investigation report. It seems she was quite the player, with a history of many men. What? Ken snatched the report, his face going pale as he read. At the end, he slumped down, defeated. It detailed that the woman had been seeing another man simultaneously with Ken, married him after leaving Ken's parents' house, and a DNA test confirmed that the child was that man's. So, am I really impotent? Unfortunately, yes. Ken was clearly devastated by this fact. I added, and Ken began to cry bitterly. The reality of his impotence was too much for him to bear. I won't be fooled. There must be some mistake. Ken can't be impotent. His mother, in denial, tore up the report. I expected this and presented another copy of the same documents. She glared at me bitterly. Then, Simon burst out laughing. This is too funny. My brother, always looking down on me, turns out to be impotent. Hey! Simon laughed heartily, looking at Ken. Then showed him his smartphone. I have 2 kids already. Dad knew about them, but I never told Mom since we were estranged. I have grandchildren. Why didn't you tell me? Ken's mother leaned in, her eyes sparkling. Simon looked at her coldly. Why would I tell you? We cut ties, remember? You haven't forgotten what you did to my wife, have you? Simon recounted everything his mother had done to his wife. Originally a high school classmate, his wife, raised by a single parent, had constantly been criticized by Ken's mother. After the marriage, the criticism only worsened, pressuring her about children. When she became pregnant, she confessed to Simon. He immediately confronted his mother and moved out, leading to their estrangement. I just wanted to toughen her up a bit, she was always so fragile. I was drawn to her kindness. Don't meddle in unnecessary things. Simon snapped back, and Ken's mother grimaced. Amidst all this, Simon sighed heavily. I never wanted to attend Ken's wedding in the first place. But Dad said Emily was a good person, so I went. I had no idea about any of this. Hearing it, Ken ground his teeth in frustration. Emily is a good person, I thought maybe Ken would change. But in the end, he just hurt her. I've grown up. I went to a better university and earn more than you. Ken's boastful attitude looked utterly ridiculous. Simon looked at him with pity. You don't know where I work, do you? You only went to a college, probably some small company, right? I'm the president of this company. Simon said, handing Ken his business card. He handed me one too, and I was surprised. I know this company. You're the president, Simon? That's right. Simon replied with a confident smile. Meanwhile, Ken was frozen, staring at the card. No wonder, Simon's company made the custom suits Ken always wore. Simon, you have so much money, you can easily pay Ken's alimony. You're his brother, help him out. No way. I won't pay a dime. And Emily wouldn't be satisfied with that. Of course not. I'll be getting it directly from him. I stated firmly. Ken slumped in defeat. I smiled at him as he looked up at me with a pleading gaze. I was wrong, Emily. Let's start over, okay? Thank you for everything so far. But there's no way I would reconsider, not even if the world turned upside down. No! Ken was truly defeated now, slumping further. I placed the alimony agreement in front of him and had him sign it. Thank you for the alimony payments in advance. And with this, we're done. We'll never meet again. There were no further responses from Ken's mother or him. Simon and I left Ken and his mother behind and exited their house. A month later, Ken paid me the entire alimony in one lump sum. Apparently, his mother had sold some land to raise the funds. The land was where their family home had stood, and now Ken and his mother were living together in an old apartment near their workplace. After selling the land, half of the money went to Ken's father, and his mother had almost nothing left after paying the alimony. She was going around telling her friends that I swindled money from her, but those who knew her character didn't take her seriously. Ken was dismissed from his job due to his increasingly unkempt appearance and frequent tardiness and absences. He had never been great at work, but his previously neat appearance and somewhat aggressive approach had been in his favor. Now, without his cleanliness, his assertiveness became a liability, and he couldn't produce results. After being fired, Ken has been juggling part-time jobs, but his personality prevents them from lasting long. His mother is also working to make ends meet, but, like Ken, she's not holding down jobs for long. Simon and his wife are expecting their third child this year. Ken's father is looking forward to the birth of another grandchild and has been actively helping out Simon's wife and taking care of the grandchildren, becoming more active than he was while living at the family home. He's even been traveling with them, building a very good relationship. Simon and his wife's kids are very affectionate and doting on me. As for me, I'm now employed at Simon's company. My skills in handicrafts came in handy, and I'm in charge of decorations for a new line of children's suits. It's a responsible and slightly nerve-wracking job, but very rewarding and enjoyable. Also, I recently started dating a man I met there. He's very kind and gets along well with Simon. They were high school classmates, and he's close to Simon's wife too, often joining us for meals at their house. I've told him about my ovary removal and the slightly reduced chances of natural conception, along with the reasons for my divorce. He's heard it all and says he doesn't mind, wanting to spend time with me more than anything. We share common interests in reading and handicrafts, and spending time together doing these things has become our weekend routine. He's even mentioned introducing me to his parents soon, which has me nervous. I'm currently making some handicrafts as a gift for them. Emily, can you do the rose decoration? Sure. Despite the hustle and bustle, life is fun and fulfilling. I'm looking forward to a happy life filled with things and people I love.